Sorry about that. A little technical difficulties. We're just waiting for Crystal to join us, the attorney, and then we'll get started in a moment.
Hey guys, how you doing?
I know that voice.
What's up?
Hey, Crystal.
Hey, Justin. Hi, Muhammad. Hi, Virginia. Hi, Chantel.
Hi.
Miss Jackson.
So we'll get started. I want to be respectful of everybody's time. It is Thursday. It is the evening. So we could just jump right in.
Okay.
Sorry about that. So I am Virginia Rollins. I am the owner of Building Blocks Together. This is Homebuyer 101. Essentially, we're bringing this to you free of charge in order to kind of, generally speaking, increase the Black home ownership rate. So we do want people to have the opportunity to connect directly with real estate professionals to get their questions answered. We do have a chat box as well as a Q&A box. The webinar is as successful as you guys participate live. I do have some guiding questions, but I do find that the more people participate, the better it is. I'll let the panelists have 2 or 3 minutes to introduce themselves, and then we'll jump right into the presentation. So I'll let Mohammed go first.
Okay. Hey, everybody, I'm Mohammed Tigil Amali. Everybody calls me Mo, the mortgage guy. I've been doing mortgages for about 20 years. Damn, I'm getting old. So basically, I get people into homes and I love what I do. Just here to answer some questions and help if I can.
Justin?
Hey, everyone. It's Justin, DKC Realty. Let's see. I got into real estate because my wife and I were buying our home. We had a tough experience with the agent. And I realized at the closing table, she still got paid. So if she can do it, and we had a tough moment with her, I could do the same thing. So I jumped in, got licensed after that. And my goal is to help people accomplish theirs, right? I believe in real estate and its potential to help uplift our communities and our families. So I just want to help folks get into their properties and their investment properties as soon as possible with the best price and the best terms. And go CUNY, before I forget.
Yes, go CUNY. I'm a SUNY grad, but definitely public schools. Crystal.
Oh, respect. My wife is SUNY grad too.
Hey guys, so my name is Crystal Young. I am a real estate attorney. Very similar to Justin, actually. I was a paralegal for 10 years before I decided to go to law school because I saw the need, just like Justin, that, you know, there weren't really a lot of attorneys that were relatable and that could, you know, really guide the clients in the way I felt that they needed to be guided when they're purchasing or selling a home. So, so I've been doing it like Muhammad for almost 20 years now, between being a paralegal and now an attorney. And I just, again, I represent buyers and sellers. So I'm glad you guys are all here today and you're on your journey towards home ownership.
Thank you, Crystal. And then last but not least, Assemblywoman Chantel Jackson.
Hi, everyone. I am Chantel Jackson. I am a licensed social worker and a new assembly member for the New York State Assembly 79th District, which is the South Bronx, representing Concourse Village, Melrose, Morrisania, Belmont, East Tremont, Claremont. So those are the areas I represent. And I campaigned on home ownership. There's a lot of, people who are renting in this neighborhood, low income neighborhood. And I understand that home ownership is a way to generational wealth. And so this is something that we definitely need to be investing in and considering. I also bought my own home when I was 23 years old. It's a co-op through the Mitchell-Lama Project. And that's something I'm going to be talking about because I believe in it.
So we'll jump right in. I'd like to give like a very, very high level of the homeownership process. A lot of people think that the first step is to go to the mortgage lender, and it's not. Typically, I'm kind of in the housing counseling space, and that's what I would like to turn building blocks into. But the first person you should go to is your housing counselor. They're going to help you set up your savings plans, create a budget. They're going to walk you through your credit report. If there's things on your credit report that's harming your credit, they're going to address that and kind of set up a game plan for you to kind of be successful on your journey to home ownership. So the first question, I think the mortgage questions always get the most love. People are always concerned about the money. So if Mohammed can kind of just go right into just different grant programs that are available.
Okay, so as far as down payment grants, there's quite a couple available. To be honest with you, I've not really been the biggest fan of them just because of the strings attached to it as far as the income cap, which, New York is expensive. So it gets a little bit difficult to find the balance where you qualify for the grant and also qualify for the house at the same time. But there are ones that are available. So the main ones that people go through usually are the HPD ones, the NACA ones. Those are the most dominant ones. I actually found one recently that doesn't have an income cap. And basically, as long as the zip code works, it's good to go. And every zip code that I plugged in thus far actually works, to my very happy surprise. So their grant actually goes from 2% to actually the full 3.5%. But at 2%, the interest rate is actually lower than for the full 3.5%. And there's no prepayment penalty on this one either. So a lot of times with the down payment grants, the interest rates are higher than a program without one. And then it comes attached with the mandatory prepay penalty, which obviously isn't ideal, but there are ones out there that don't have that either.
Awesome. So we have a question that came in. How do you find a housing counselor? You can actually just Google HUD housing counselors. And if you're down in the city, each borough actually has about like 5 or 6 of them. So I think, to me anyway, that's the easiest way to look for them. But Leslie, if you follow up, I'll drop my email in the chat, and I can kind of connect you directly with one. And then we have another question. Somebody wants to know, do FHA mortgages still exist? But Mohammed, instead of answering that question, I would like for you to kind of tell the difference between FHA, conventional, and VA.
Sure. So let's start with VA, just get it out of the way. VA is only available to you basically if you're in the military. If you weren't in there, it's not for you. The difference between FHA and conventional is FHA is insured by the federal government, which means it's less risky. When a loan is less risky, it's more appealing to the bank as far as terms. So there's things you can get away with on FHA that you can't on conventional. Conventional, if you're putting down 20% or more, you have no PMI. But also, let's say you put down 15%. Or even if you put down 5%, the PMI will disappear once you have 20% equity. Whereas on FHA, the MIP, which is basically the same thing as PMI, is there for the life of the loan, the full 30 years, unless you're putting down 10% or more, then it disappears on year 12. Normally, FHA has lower interest rates because, again, it's less risky. It's insured by the federal government. And the minimum down payment on FHA is 3.5%. Obviously, you can always put down more. Hell, put down 99% if you got it. That's pretty much it.
Okay. If I have less than perfect credit, which loan option would be the best option?
More than likely, FHA would be the best option because, again, it's less risky, so the banks are more willing to take it. Let's say even you have stellar credit, but for instance, bankruptcy, the allowable time to get an FHA loan compared to conventional, FHA is again more lenient on that. And then let's say you have a score of like a 660. In today's market, let's say, it's not a high balance, anything like that, you're looking at like a 2.5% interest rate with 3.5% down. Whereas on conventional, you could have Jesus with you and you ain't gonna get that.
Okay. Somebody asked what is
We should
considered
also
less
fix
than.
our credit before we go looking for loans. Like fixing your credit is not hard. It's something that's doable. It only takes a few months to do. So let's
Absolutely.
definitely consider that.
Yeah, so somebody asked, kind of piggybacking off of what Chantel just said, what's considered less than perfect credit? Most FHA products, they start accepting or approving mortgage loans around the 640, 660 credit score. I would be cognizant as a person starting to, take this home buying journey with COVID. The banks, the rates are super low. But banks did increase their credit lending standards like almost simultaneously as COVID hit. So I would, if you are in the range of 640 to 660, I would caution you to kind of, get that extra 20 point bump, 30 point bump, to at least get you to the, 690 range, 700 range, so you can actually qualify for a mortgage. And then there's NACA. And they are what you would call credit character-based lending. They're not so much looking at your credit score specifically, but they do want to see that you are responsible. Lendee. You pay your bills on time. You pay your rent on time. You are able to kind of adhere to their work plan and save a certain amount with their shock payment. So that's also another option for you as well. And I can drop that in the chat, the link for that in the chat as well. Somebody says, if I live in the Bronx but looking to buy in Orange or Putnam counties, will the counselors still help me with the process? Yes. Typically, the housing counselors, they give you the homebuyer education, which is good for New York State. A lot of people, at least in my experience in real estate, they get, it's unfortunate in many ways, but they get qualified for the grants downstate. And then unfortunately, they kind of have to move upstate somewhat for affordability reasons. So yes, the grant would be good for the entire state.
I'd like to just add, so yes, during COVID, they did raise the minimum credit score. They actually just removed that overlay a few days ago. So now at a 620, you're good to go. Under 620 is still possible as long as the automatic underwriting system gives you the approve as well. But the terms are garbage under 620. Definitely get your score up.
Mohammed, how does student loans affect the chances of getting approved?
So it depends which program you go into. Normally, let's say you have a student loan that's deferred. As far as your debt to income ratio, they'll go by 1% of the balance, and that'll be the payment used towards your debt to income ratio.
Okay. We have a question. Are you familiar, Mohammed, with Sunny Mae loan products?
Not too much, because so I'm a mortgage broker.
Okay.
We don't have the access to Sony Mae, but on the banking side, that's normally the vehicle that they use for a lot of the down payment grants. But again, not every down payment grant has to go through Sony Mae.
Right. Justin, we have an agent question. Somebody asked, is the appraisal added to your loan or is that a separate expense?
Is the appraisal added to your loan? Usually pay the appraisal at the time of the appraisal. So that's going to be separate from your other closing costs.
Justin, can you also kind of touch on what your role is as the agent, kind of when you first obviously are introduced to the client, kind of walking them all the way to almost to when you hand them off to Crystal?
Hand them off to Crystal is a good thing because you're in good hands. But process from beginning to end, I usually like to meet with people. I always recommend a consultation with whoever you plan to work with or are thinking of working with. It's your opportunity to interview someone. You definitely want to see if someone's interested in your goals and how they can help you strategize to accomplish them. During the initial consultation, I like to learn what people are looking for in terms of a property, price, area, and then we can build a plan from there. Of course, you want to talk to your lender if you need one to get the pre-approval, maybe a housing counselor as well, depending on how you're going about things. And then from there, it's filtering out properties based off what you're interested in and what the financing is telling us we can go for. Once we have that, it's me scheduling the appointments so we can go view the properties. I tell people in this market right now, because there are not that many homes and there are a lot of buyers, if you like a lot of properties, put in a lot of offers. Don't just go with the number one in your heart, because we got bidding wars going on all over the place. So put in the multiple offers. You get something, you could get it accepted right away. Get it countered by the seller. It could be a bidding war where the seller's asking everyone to submit a second offer with their highest price and their best terms. Once you have an accepted offer, you're typically going to do an inspection on any house. I don't care if it's brand new or gut renovated, whatever, please do an inspection. Things are found all the time. So get your inspection done. Then you can try and negotiate with the seller for them to fix things or to see if they'll reduce the price. Once you have the inspection part handled, that's typically when we hand it off to Crystal, because the seller's attorney will draft the contract and send it to her for review. And then we start getting the contract stuff going and the bank comes back in a big way.
You're on mute.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you, Justin. Chantel, can you walk us through your process? How long did it take you to save? Did you have to like work on your credit, improve your credit in any way? Did you have any massive debts that you kind of had to tackle over a period of time before you qualified for the mortgage loan?
So when I bought my home at 23, I actually did not have a lot of debt. I had a school loan that I might have just ended school, so I was still in the phase where I didn't have to repay my loans. So I had a small loan, shout out to CUNY City College, small loan, and I had like maybe one or two store cards, right? And so I didn't have a lot of debt. My credit score was always good. Like I think when I bought my home, I had like a 740, like a 740, I think. And so I didn't have those issues where I had to like figure out how I was gonna buy my home. And with the Mitchell-Lama program, the homes are affordable. And to be 23 and able to afford a piece of property in the Bronx, that was a big deal for me. So I think my first home was what they call the complex, which was really small, 1 bedroom. And I bought it for like $8,000. That same apartment, I think, is like $16,000 right now, which is still affordable, right? And so I bought that, and at the time it was rent with the option to buy. So I was able. It was like as if I was renting the apartment, but after 3 years, I was able to purchase it. And I've already put money aside every single month. So what they did was they take out the maintenance and they take out the equity, and they put whatever they collected for the equity towards the price of the apartment. So that's how I was able to purchase my first apartment within 3 years at being in my 20s. And then I bought my second apartment in the same complex, which was a little bit more. So I went and got a loan from Citibank, and I think the loan process took me about 2 months to do. And it was just because they were collecting paperwork. It was just a matter of making sure all of my paperwork was in order. So that's one thing I want to tell people, like if your stuff is all over the place and you can't find things, now's the time to start putting all your paperwork in order. Make sure you can find them, especially for programs like NACA, because they're asking for almost everything. So make sure your bank statements are in order. Do not have funny money coming in and out. Like, be very mindful of those things, because the banks, they look at everything that comes in and out of your checking and savings account just to make sure that everything lines up. So just make sure your paperwork is in order, and be prepared to submit stuff on time.
Thanks, Chantel. Just to echo what she's saying, I find that people are scared of paperwork. Please, you have to get over that. They want your W-2s, they want your pay stubs, they want your taxes. They want really all the most personal information that you don't want to give them. that's the information that they're looking for to kind of qualify you and validate that you are, who you say you are. So, if you're afraid of paperwork, NACA is going to ask for it. The private sector is going to ask for it. The only real way that you get out of paperwork is if you're buying properties cash. And even in that instance, on some level, there's some level of paperwork. So we have to kind of get away from being afraid from, kind of presenting our paperwork to kind of get ahead. So another question came in. Let's see. What is the safest process for credit repair? Being kind of in the housing counseling space, I do recommend a housing counselor because not only are they going to help you improve your credit, they're going to help you create savings plans, they're going to help you save, and they're actually going to probably, and most likely they should walk you through and assist you with applying for grants as well. So I would say the housing counseling is the most holistic approach. But if you have a reputable credit specialist that you trust, that has good reviews, that's worked with somebody that you trust their opinion, I would say give them a shot as well. But if your ultimate goal is to buy a property, to me, again, the most holistic experience would be the housing counselor.
And can I just add that with credit repair, it's not, if you can learn how to do something, it's not something you have to pay someone to teach you how to do. Be mindful of those programs that say, oh, we're going to consolidate your all of your credit and things like that. Be very mindful of those things because they may not. So I was in a situation, I think I owe like $10,000 and that got me scared, right? Some people like 10,000, that's nothing. But I was scared at $10,000 and, I considered going to the consolidation programs. But what was explained to me is that they're going to lump all my bills together. And at some point, like they may not be paying my cards on time. And so that would have affected my credit score worse than if I never even considered going to consolidation. So just be very mindful of programs and people. Make sure you understand the terms when people are telling you what they can and cannot do for you. So be very mindful of what it is. And I think with credit repair, the main thing is getting your debt down and paying on time. Like everything that you owe, make sure you're making some payments towards that. And getting that debt down.
Sorry, I think my Wi-Fi is going in and out. Somebody asked, can you use grant money for down payment and or closing costs? Most grant programs are dedicated to down payment and or closing costs. I would also kind of caution you be cautious that if you're thinking that you're going to get a grant and you're going to have zero money out of pocket, that just doesn't happen, right? So you're going to have a grant that's going to assist you with most likely the bulk of your closing costs. But when you put in your offer, you have to submit a deposit. The bank is looking for a deposit. The inspector is looking to be paid up front. You might have the deposit for the attorney fees as well. So absolutely utilize the grant programs, but be careful if you're thinking that it's going to be zero money out of pocket. And kind of when is the best time for a person to involve an attorney?
So that question's directed towards me. I think you were breaking up right at the start, but I did hear the attorney part, so I'm chiming in here.
Yes, that was for you. Sorry.
All right. So when's the best time for a client to engage with an attorney? So it's very important to have a good team when you're looking for a house. So first you start with the mortgage lender, because why you need a pre-approval, because you need to know where you stand in terms of what you can afford, and also what you can afford, not only in terms of the home cost, like the home value, but also like the taxes that are associated with it. So you start with your mortgage lender, and then you make your way to Justin here, amazing agent. He will make sure that whatever, your price range is in terms of, that pre-approval, he's going to find you the perfect home. And then you also then need an attorney. So I would suggest when you are in the market to buy a home, you want to set up your team right from the start. Like Justin said, the handoff, right? I come in after Justin has now found the home. Seller's attorney will prepare that contract and send it to me. But you don't, at that point, you just want to be all set up. You don't want to wait until, you find the home and now you're like, okay, let me call 5 attorneys and figure out who I want to use. You want to already know and have all your ducks in a row. So I come in at the time in which Justin has now found you a home. And I communicate with the seller's attorney. Seller's attorney will prepare that contract, email it to me. I'll go through it with you. And then you'll sign and write your down payment. So the best time to engage with an attorney is right when you're setting up your team. And that's when you have the idea in your mind that you want to buy a home. So as soon as tonight, you get in contact with Mohammed here, Justin, myself, by way of email, telephone, however, and set that team up right away, because you don't want to again, try to figure it out as you're going along. You want to know that you have your team together. And also, if you have any questions for any of us, while you're looking for the house, while you're applying for the mortgage or getting your pre-approval, at least we're there. You can always we're only a phone call away. So I hope that answered the question, Virginia.
Yes.
Okay.
So I want to kind of pull something out of what Crystal said. The reason for me setting up the kind of the webinars in this manner is that so you can follow up directly with what you just said, your real estate team, right? So I'm essentially helping you on many levels kind of put your real estate team together and set you up for success kind of moving forward as you move through the process. Another question for you, Crystal. Can the attorney represent both the buyer and the seller?
So there's no law against representing the buyer and seller, but it's strongly not suggested. Why? Because of the conflict of interest. The seller has an interest to sell the property and for the best price, right? The buyer has an interest to purchase and for a price that makes sense to them. So already we're at two different parties with two separate interests. Attorneys do it all the time. They sign a conflict letter, particularly when you're selling between like family members. If you're purchasing your house from mom or dad, there's an understanding that there is an agreement in place and everyone's on the same page, but it's not a good idea to use the same attorney that the seller's using when you're purchasing a home. You should definitely have your own attorney that's unbiased and just working to protect your individual interests. But it can be done. There's no law against it, not at least in the state of New York.
Awesome, thank you. Justin, what happens after a home is inspected and everything comes back clear, so to speak?
Everything comes back clear. Well, if you're moving forward with your purchase, you're gonna have we notify the other agent and we draft up what's called a memo of sale. That's just us ordering the contract. So now the seller's attorney will draft the contract, send it to your buyer's attorney, and the attorneys will do attorney talk with each other back and forth, make sure everything is good, they agree on every word in the contract, and then you should be meeting with your buyer's attorney to have them review the contract with you to make sure you understand it and are comfortable with it, and then you can sign off and give your deposit at that time.
Awesome. Justin, I think this might be a question for you. What are the pros and cons, if you're familiar, of buying a house in foreclosure?
Ooh, foreclosure question. I did a video on short sales. I really should do one on foreclosures too. But okay, so foreclosures are bank-owned properties, right? So the person, I guess, they were delinquent on their mortgage, and the bank took it over. So now the bank has it and they're selling it, right? A couple of things are going to be different. One, the bank is not fixing anything. right? So you can do as many inspections as you like. You are buying that house exactly as it is. If the water is not running, if the electric's turned off, they don't care, right? So that's one. Two, you are gonna pay what's called transfer taxes. So typically the seller will pay the transfer taxes in a transaction, but the bank doesn't want to incur any additional fees or costs. So they're gonna put that onto the buyer side, right? So you're gonna have a few, depending on the sales price, but you can expect at least a few more $1,000s in terms of your closing costs, right? What else you need to know? The bank usually wants what's called an earnest money deposit. So in New York, we typically just give our down payment and then we go into contract. But the bank is saying, hey, when you make that initial offer, you're gonna have to give us like a pre-down payment. And if you decide to voluntarily walk away before we even get into contract, we have the right to try and keep that pre-down payment, that earnest money deposit. Typically doesn't happen, but the banks want to sell the properties. They don't like homes, they like mortgages, right? So those are, I guess you could call all those three cons. On the pro side, price is usually less, but you have to factor in how much is it going to cost to repair this if the home needs repair, along with the decrease in purchase price to see if it makes sense for you. Depends. Investors have been snatching up foreclosures left and right. So I would normally say it's not as competitive, but that's not too true in this kind of market. And usually banks prefer all cash deals. And if you are buying a bank loan, if you are buying a foreclosure and it requires a ton of work, you're going to have to get what's called a renovation loan. So you're not going to be able to go in with a regular FHA conventional. You're going to need like a 203K loan or a home steady or whatever Fannie Mae calls it on the conventional side.
Thank you, Justin. We have a couple of questions. Are you licensed in New Jersey and or Connecticut?
I am New York and Connecticut. Thank you for asking. New Jersey, after they lost the Nets, I lost interest. But if the Nets move back out there, I'll be there.
Chantel, we have a question. If you buy a Mitchell-Lama co-op, would you still be considered, and maybe this is Justin too, would you still be considered a first-time home buyer if you, I'm assuming, buy a traditional property, a residential property?
If you use a mortgage to buy your home, then that is your first time. That's your first home. And so I feel like sometimes we get wrapped up in this idea of like, I gotta have a first-time home buyers program, but you guys can correct me, but it's gimmicky from the banks. Like there's always money out there to help you purchase a property, right? It's lots of grants out there. You don't have to only be a first-time home buyer to get money to help you with closing costs and things like that. So you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but that's been my experience.
Yeah, generally speaking, banks do have various programs that do assist you outside of first-time homebuyer program. So that you are correct in that, Chantel.
And for New York considers you a first-time home buyer for most of their programs if you haven't owned a home in the last 3 years. So even if you owned a home 5 years ago and sold it then, and now you're going to buy something else, you're going to be considered a first-time home buyer for the most part.
Yeah.
Mohammed, we have a question. I'm assuming this person probably came in a little late. Can you kind of go over the amounts saved that you would be looking for somebody looking to purchase a $300,000 house? Well, first, let me say, $300 house could be very arbitrary, right? It really depends on what your affordability is. The bank is not going to approve you, even if you have perfect credit, no debt, things like that. They're not going to approve you if your income doesn't support it. So I think any house number is arbitrary. But Mohammed, can you kind of just go over the deposit, or excuse me, down payment requirements for like percentage-wise for FHA and conventional?
So with conventional, technically you can go as low as 3% down, but then the interest rate is high and you're stuck with it for 30 years. So it doesn't really make most sense normally. Now with FHA, the minimum down payment is 3.5%, where at 3.5%, you're still, getting a rate in the mid twos basically. And that's without any points or anything like that.
We have another question. Can you find your own inspector, or does the lender appoint one for you? The home buying process, you do have a lot of assistance, but a lot of it is you kind of doing it on your own. And I think that really kind of puts kind of more in perspective your real estate team, right? I think real estate is very heavy referral based. So your agent and kind of people you're working with will usually have, a list of people that they're comfortable working with, and they kind of tell you to go vet them, and you ultimately make the decision yourself. So no, the bank is not going to help you with the inspector. You kind of have to do that by yourself. Suggestions. Sorry. Somebody says that they owe taxes from 2019. They're on a payment plan and haven't defaulted. Would that affect their chances of approval?
As long, I'm assuming this question is for me, or?
Yes, Mohammed, I'm sorry.
No problem. So if you're in a payment plan, that's fine, as long as you make 3 payments and you have to make them each month. You can't just pay it up front. So as long as you have a payment plan and have proof of 3 payments, you're good to go.
We have another question. I took out a personal loan to consolidate my credit card debt a few months ago. How long should I wait to apply for pre-approval? Mohammed.
I mean, honestly, just do it immediately. So, and I should probably mention this, you can get pre-approved, and worst case scenario, let's say you don't get pre-approved, at least this way you know exactly what the issues are and how to overcome those hurdles pretty much immediately.
I'm not sure if the question is asking like, when will my debt be lowered? So I think that because they talked about consolidating, so you're probably wondering like, when is it going to show up on your credit report, I guess, or something like that. So
yeah,
that, right?
Yeah, so it sounds like they recently kind of consolidated debt. It may or may not still be on the higher end. And I guess they're thinking about a time frame like 6 months, 3 months, a year. When's most appropriate for them to seek pre-approval?
I mean, honestly, as soon as the score goes up to a 620. Now, another thing is, if you're consolidating your debt, will it in fact raise your score? So one of the big things when it comes to credit is if you want to raise your score, to keep your balance between 11 and 30% of the high credit limit. Now, let's say you're consolidating debt and, just for argument's sake, let's say it's $1,000 balance, where the high credit limit on the same account is $1,000. That's not going to help your credit.
Okay, thank you. Somebody asked, what type of mortgage, Mohammed, do you guys have any rehab loan type products?
Yeah, so there's a few of them. Right now, though, to be honest with you, since COVID, the banks are still doing them, but they're looking at them as if they're much more riskier than usual. So the interest rates are higher than programs that don't require renovations. But obviously, if it's a house that absolutely needs renovations, which need to be done just to pass appraisal, they are available.
Awesome. Somebody asked, I guess in my experience, how many grants have I seen a first-time home buyer receive? Me personally, I think it was like 3 at the same time. But you have to be like really careful, because I know, so grants sometimes go in cycles, and if they run out of money, it might not get funded to, a couple of months later. It might be not until like the next year. So I was working, I'm upstate New York, by the way. This is kind of for, Bronx buyers. But somebody was working with the Homebuyer Dream Grant. I believe they used the Sunny May NRP grant. And then they also had a city of choice, so a local municipality grant. And they were able to kind of stack those grants. So for me personally, the most has been 3. But again, you have to kind of be careful with like deadlines and requirements for like specific grants. Somebody says New York City is expensive. What do you guys recommend as the easiest way to get started with multifamilies in the city?
No, I'm joking.
Ooh, that's a good one. Come to the Bronx. This is where it's at. We're the most affordable.
We're the most affordable, but it's hard to find multifamilies in the Bronx. because we have a lot more tenements than we do like single and multi-families. Not that it's impossible, I'm just saying that it's just harder than our other areas. And that whole $300,000 is not gonna work anywhere in the Bronx. So if it doesn't work in the Bronx, it's not working anywhere else in the city. So like when I was looking for multifamily, everything was 600,000 and above. And you know, I haven't looked in a while, but it's a little more costly than 300,000, that's for sure.
Justin, can you, I think I asked you privately for some information on this, but if you know the numbers, can you kind of say what the median sales price of, I guess, a single family home would be in the Bronx?
Hold on, I had this saved on the laptop. All right, so from 2020, we got our average sale price in the Bronx on a single family was 535,000. Just a little right about there. Then we went to, oh, this is our multifamily. So multifamily, you're probably around 650 to 7. But yeah, the prices have been trending upwards consistently. We're not at Brooklyn or Queens or Manhattan levels, but we're trending upward. And I think people are starting to notice that about the borough.
Absolutely.
Mohammed, in terms of, I guess, pre-approvals, do you find that, I guess, from your end, do you find that, I guess, the city is affordable? Are people like looking to get mortgages with you and then, you know, having to move outside of the city to kind of utilize what they've been approved for?
Well, so the trend I've been seeing, especially since COVID, is a lot of people are going towards the suburbs for, it's not even real, affordability is one factor, but a big factor is, you know, in this new COVID world, a lot of people are realizing they can work from home. So location isn't as important as it was 12 months ago. And then let's say, you know, you do go to Mount Vernon or you go to Long Island, the property taxes are way higher than it is in New York City. But then there's tax write-offs that come with that as well.
So for some of my clients, I've been taking them to Connecticut because of the property taxes that we're finding in Westchester and Rockland and Putnam. And when you cross that border into Stamford and those other areas, your property taxes probably go down about 50 to 70%. So it's been an option for a lot of people. That's if you're interested in the area.
Yeah.
Justin, I guess somebody has a question of how do you determine if a house is a better investment compared to a condo for your first property?
If a house is a better investment than a condo for your first property, I mean, I guess it depends on how you're defining investment there. Do you mean it's a property you're going to live in, or do you mean it's a property you plan to rent out? Then you got to do the numbers comparison. Like the condo is going to have the built-in maintenance fee that a house won't have, but you're going to be responsible for more maintenance in a house as opposed to a condo. So you got to start weighing different factors there. If we're assuming we're talking about like the same location, basically the same condition, you can start comparing those and how important is appreciation to you, because typically a house is going to appreciate faster than a condo will. So there's a lot of different moving parts you got to use and have your little spreadsheet to analyze everything.
And I think it's about preference, right? Like, what are you looking for, a condo versus a home? Like, some people want space, and so you may get that more in your single family than you would in a condo. You don't want to have neighbors yelling, you know, across the hall or whatever. So it's about your preference, because they could, in some situations, they could cost the same, and then that's something that you need to be mindful of.
Justin, what tips would you offer somebody house hunting in the Bronx? Because typically the properties in the Bronx are not renovated, and I'm assuming and/or turnkey ready.
We got a lot of turnkey ready stuff out here, but we got a lot of stuff that needs work. I ain't gonna front. So what would I say? House hunting tips. So of course be pre-approved already. You got to know your needs versus your wants. So know what you definitely have to have in a house versus what your preferences are for a house. And I would say definitely, especially in this market now, prioritize your needs if you're looking now. What else? Try and be as available as you can be to see properties as soon as they hit the market, especially if something is turnkey ready. They're turning over like hotcakes. So you want to be able to see it as soon as it comes out, because even 2 or 3 days later, the house has multiple offers and the seller stopped showing. That's what we're finding a lot of times. And be ready. I mean, when you find it and you like it, put in that offer. Check with your lender, of course, to make sure the numbers are comfortable for you, not in terms of the 30 years, but in terms of like your monthly payment, because that to me is the biggest number. You want to make sure you're comfortable with that number.
So somebody asked, and I think I could take this question, what are the first steps to starting the process of home ownership? I think you should know what your credit score is anyway. But during COVID, I believe freeannualcreditreport.com is giving you access to your scores more often than they typically would, which I think is once a year. So I would say first and foremost, kind of get a clear picture and an accurate picture of what your credit is. Credit Karma is not accurate. And not that it's not accurate, they just simply use a different scoring model than what the lenders do, what the banks do. If you were going for a car loan, it's just a different scoring model. So if you can get, your credit score beforehand, and then also, if you're working with a credit specialist, they would, one of their first steps is to pull your credit. Working with a housing counselor, one of their first steps is to pull your credit. So I would definitely say know what your credit score is. If you don't have savings, obviously one of the first things that you're going to need to do, whether it's by yourself or with assistance, is kind of set up that savings plan. If there's debt to be addressed, you're going to have to, at least on some level, tackle some of that debt. Mohammed, yes. Can you let us know how student loans affect people getting approved for a mortgage?
Sure. So with student loans, if it's deferred, unfortunately, you can't use a 0 when doing the debt to income ratio. They're going to use 1% of the balance. That's pretty much it.
Yeah, so I think that's pretty standard with traditional banks as well. They are using that like 1% to kind of calculate, your affordability, if you will, what you'll be approved for. I'm interested in buying a condo. What type of loans are good for first-time home buyers? Is Mohammed, is there a difference? And I'll ask a different question just so it could be answered a little bit better. Is there a difference in loan products that you would apply for and or utilize between different property types?
Yes. Oh, damn. All right. So this is going to take a couple. So with co-ops, FHA won't touch it. You have to go conventional. Conventional will do with 10% down, but most co-op boards, I believe, require 20%, right, Justin?
Usually, I mean, around here, usually 10, but then you have some that require 20, some are 50, some are all cash. It depends on the co-op.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now with condos, you can go FHA if the property is FHA approved, which unfortunately not all of them are. They're making it a little bit easier to convert them into being FHA approved. The main thing is they want at least 51% of the units sold to individual people, not just, one owner. Otherwise, then you can't go conventional. Now, 3 and 4 families, you can go conventional or FHA, but on conventional, they're going to require 25% down on 3 or 4 units. Where FHA, 3.5% down, the house is yours, as long as your income and everything else is
right. Crystal, can you go over what title insurance is and the importance of title insurance? And then can you also go over, I guess, examples of good closing day scenarios versus bad closing day scenarios?
Yeah, well, that's a broad question. I may have to bring in Mohammed, Justin, Chantel, you, Virginia. we can all relate to those. But I'll start with title insurance and then we'll see how it goes with the scenarios. But yes, so title insurance, it's like any type of insurance, right? You get you purchase a car, and so that's what we are most familiar with. You have to have car insurance. And so same, when you purchase a home, you have to have title insurance. What the title insurance is a policy that shows when you purchase the home, you have what they call clear title. Clear title means there are no mortgages on the property. You purchased the home without judgments, liens. The seller wasn't in bankruptcy preventing him from selling, or him or her from selling that home. So ultimately you have to have title insurance when you purchase a home, just to ensure you have clear title. Now that insurance policy becomes very important several times. I'm sorry. At several points in time. So it becomes important when you go to sell the property. When you go to sell the property after you've purchased it, what happens is your buyer will order a title report. When your buyer orders the title report, that title report may still show the mortgage that was on title when you purchased the property. So you purchased a property from me. I had a mortgage. At your closing, I paid off my mortgage. My bank now never sent out that satisfaction of mortgage. So now it's 10 years later, 5 years later, you go to sell that property, and guess what? That my mortgage, the seller, when you purchase the property, my mortgage is still on that property. Now you have a title insurance policy that's going to show, okay, there were no mortgages on that property when I purchased. That mortgage was paid off at closing, and that title insurance policy protects you. So you don't have to go looking for your seller. You don't have to go looking for your attorney that represented you when you went to purchase. You don't have to look for a sales attorney. You just go right to the title company. Just like, in the car scenario, if you're in a crash, you don't have to go run around, call the hospital, call the doctor, you just call. Who do you call? You call the insurance company, and the insurance company sets up everything, make sure you're okay. Same thing, homeowners, with title insurance, when you have that insurance on the property, you just make one phone call to the title insurance company, and the title insurance company will confirm that when you bought that house, there were no judgments, no liens, nothing like that. So that's the importance of title insurance. Now you had another question. Now the question was, what can, what is it? What can come up that could prevent or delay a closing? Okay, a lot of things. But when you have a good team, this is very important. When you have a good team, you heard Muhammad, he said he's been doing this 20 years. You hear Justin's been doing this a number of years. I've been doing it, a number of years. So we've all seen all these different scenarios. So let's just think, and Muhammad has his own experience. Justin has myself as well. So for me, it's things in the contract. When you're purchasing a home, I think maybe Justin mentioned, the inspection, and, that inspection is done, and the seller may agree to make some repairs. One thing that we want to make sure that when you're working with your attorney, you tell your attorney everything. We're not going to run and tell your business nothing, so you tell your attorney everything, and trust the attorney you're using. Because why that's important is because if the attorney knows, they'll make sure that certain provisions are placed in the contract to protect you. So when we talk about the inspection, say, just for instance, a repair needed to be done, if you don't communicate that with the attorney, then that language is not going to be placed in the contract. And if it's not in writing, it's like it didn't happen. So those are things. So now you do your walkthrough, and you're looking for maybe the washer and dryer to be hooked up. It's not hooked up. It's not even there. And you're like, but the seller promised me they were going to put in a washer dryer. No, you know, it never was placed in writing. They didn't sign. They're going to pretend they never said it. So, so those things are important. Anything, if they say, you know, listen, we service the boiler, we, you know, empty the, you know, if there's a cesspool or something like that, you want all that paperwork, and we want to ensure that it's placed in writing, that these things were done. If they're just telling you and now you're looking for paperwork, it's not going to fly if it's not in writing. So things like that come up, because one thing I don't know if we mentioned, but on the day of closing or the night before, as close as possible, you want to do what's called a walkthrough. Now that walkthrough, you're going to make sure everything's in working order: the plumbing, the heating, the AC, the electrical. If there's a repair list, you're going to look at that repair list and make sure those things were done, because after the closing, it's your home. So you can't go back to the seller for anything. So those are things that I see a lot, that, you know, we get to the closing, the day of the closing, and I get a call from the buyer, from maybe the agent, and hey, this wasn't done, this wasn't done. So those are things that can come up, just things that that weren't in the contract. Also now, you know, in terms of the mortgage contingency clauses, you know, you want to make sure. I recently had a scenario in which the contract said that the buyer would apply for a mortgage of no more than X. So say 500,000. Ultimately, the buyer got denied. And when that denial letter came over, it said that he applied for 600,000. So that's a problem, right? And so if you're going to apply for more, you have to let everyone know, so we can just go back, let the seller know, hey, by the way, you know, we're applying for a little bit more money. If you're going to be approved, then you don't have to worry about anything, right? Because you're going to be approved. But this would only come up in the case of a denial. So let's see what else I can think of. There's so many things. I don't want to focus on any of the bad things that can happen, because there are numerous items, and I don't want to, you know, scare anyone away from buying a house, because honestly, again, if you have a good team, there's 99.999% of deals will close with a good team. You know, if you go to Muhammad and you get a pre-approval, the chances of you not being approved, as long as you're not doing anything to affect your credit or anything like that during the transaction, I mean, you're going to close. Same with Justin, you know, he's going to find you a house at some point. So you just work with him. And then when it comes to the attorney, as long as you're transparent with the attorney, and the attorney, you know, knows what they're doing as a real estate attorney and puts all those provisions in the contract, you're going to be able to close. And sometimes there is a delay because of, you know, different reasons. Maybe the seller isn't ready to go at the time you receive your loan clearance to close. Maybe you know, something with, you know, your mortgage, maybe you just paid something off and you have to wait for a time frame for that information to hit the credit report or something like that. But usually the parties understand that, and, you know, they're willing to wait. So yeah, that's really all I have to say. You'll close, don't worry.
Thank you for that,
with your
Crystal.
team, you'll be okay.
Yes, thank you for that. Yeah, so typically, you know, obviously we do want to go into closing day with most positive spirits, but just knowing some of those pitfalls might prevent them from happening to you. So I just did want to touch on those briefly. Somebody asked about who exactly is on your real estate team. I would say your housing counselor, obviously people we have today, your lender, your attorney, your realtor. Other important people in the process, the inspector is going to be really important, and your insurance agent is going to be play a pivotal role as well. Mohammed, we have a question about co-borrowing. One person has fair credit and one person has good credit. How should they proceed?
All right. So the way the banks look at credit is, I'm gonna catch flag for this. The way the banks look at everything is worst case scenario. So whoever has the worst credit on the file is the credit score that everything is gonna go based off of. So basically, if somebody on the file has a 620 credit score and the other person has an 830 credit score, your rate is calculated based on the 620, which thank God rates are still low. So you're still looking at a very good interest rate.
Mm. So maybe if the person is going to hurt your, I guess, decrease what you would be approved for, maybe you shouldn't add them. So in the case that you don't want them on your mortgage loan, could they still be on the deed? I'm not sure if that's a Muhammad question or a Crystal question.
I guess let me take the first half. So usually when you're adding a co-borrower, well, no, anytime you're adding a co-borrower, it's either for the assets for the down payment, which you can always just use a gift of equity and then that's fine. But it's normally because you're using the income to qualify for the debt to income ratio. Now, if you don't want the person on the mortgage, that's definitely more of a Crystal question, I believe. You're on mute. Or should I just take the ball with it? So if you don't want the co-borrower on the mortgage, you could just throw them on the deed and that's fine.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Yeah, you'll decide, of course, with your mortgage lender, what works for you. And then the attorney will do the rest in terms of who's going to be added to the deed, who's going to be on title. So for sure. And that's why another thing, I know we're like beating a dead horse here with the importance of a team, but the attorney works very closely with the real estate agent and your mortgage lender throughout. So as you're working with Muhammad and getting approved, Muhammad may say, Crystal, something very simple like, listen, you need to add the middle initial to the name because, we need that, for funding purposes because, maybe there's another family member that has the same name and there's judgments or, something like, removing parties or adding parties. These are things that, the attorney works with the lender to ensure the contract is updated with amendments to ensure that, you get approved for a mortgage with a proper contract.
Yeah.
Awesome. Somebody asked, what are the best mortgage approval sites? I do not recommend going on Rocket Mortgage or anything like that. Just kind of like sticking your finger in the air. I don't recommend that. And that's kind of why, I get the mortgage like lender or broker, somebody that you can directly be put in contact with. So I don't know any sites because I do direct referrals. Maybe somebody else on the call might have particular sites or specific processes, to get the best mortgage approval.
Ask for referrals, ask people that bought houses, ask family. If you're speaking to a realtor, ask the realtor or your attorney, who do you know that's closing deals? Or just call me.
Yeah, you can call Muhammad. But yeah, so I think again, real estate is very heavily like referral based.
Absolutely.
People that you've previously worked with, again, somebody bought a property or somebody has investment properties. They frequent the real estate market, that arena. They might have a little bit more insight than somebody who's also a first time home buyer.
Yeah, thanks.
Do you need flood insurance? If your property is located in a flood zone, you will. If not, you won't. Next question, I think just...
And check to see about the mortgage with that.
What's that?
When it comes to flood insurance, you definitely want to get a sense of how much it is per month because you want to talk to your lender and see if it affects your eligibility a lot, like whether you can be competitive on that home or not.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Any significant changes, added costs, you definitely want to make sure everybody, again, on your home team, your home buying team, is aware of those changes so everybody can adjust accordingly. And there are no surprises, as Crystal talked about at the closing table. Mohammed, can you kind of speak to somebody starting the home buying process and that they've already been pre-approved, uh, maybe signed their purchase contract, but decided they're going to buy a new car? What would be your advice for that?
If one of my clients do that, I'm fighting them. Don't do it. Once you get pre-approved, do not buy anything. You know, do not mess up your credit. You want your credit score to go up, not down. When you buy a car, your credit score drops because that thing we spoke about, the balance in relation to the high credit limit. Not to mention the credit inquiries. Do not buy any big ticket items, and don't quit your job either, just, while we're going into it.
Can you kind of speak to, and I just kind of thought about this question with COVID, if you were laid off, obviously because of COVID, but prior to that, you were gainfully employed for like the 2 to 3 year period, that the bank is typically looking for. You're now working again. Would that negatively affect you as a home buyer?
You might have to write a good letter of explanation, but it's within reason, so let's even forget about COVID for a moment. Let's say, you have one job, you see a better job, and you move on. As long as you're at the new job for at least about 4 weeks and you have a total of 2-year work history, throughout your entire life, you're good to move forward.
Awesome. Justin, in your experience, what would you say, and I guess everybody can answer this on some level, what would you say is the ideal amount of money that somebody should have saved, particularly in the Bronx market?
Ideal amount of money. All the money you can save, as much as possible. The more, the better. I don't want to say just really much. But yeah, you definitely want to have your down payment covered. You want to have your closing costs covered. And for me, I want you to have money after you close in the bank, because you should have an emergency fund in case things come up in the house, because things come up in the house, right? And you might have other things going on in life that can come up as well. So the more, the better. If we're talking about like a just general number, I'll say if you're doing like an FHA 3.5% down, then you want to have 10% overall of the purchase price. So you can have your down payment, your closing costs, and then have your little emergency fund. But more is better. And if you can hit that 20% and avoid mortgage insurance and have more equity in the house from the beginning, go that way.
Awesome. Thank you. Crystal, kind of in that same breath of closing costs and fees, can you speak to typical attorney fees? Who's responsible for them? And what typical costs are covered by the closing costs?
I'm sorry, guys. Can you repeat that?
What fees, I guess, what's covered in closing costs? So when they say closing costs, what's kind of encompassed in that? And then I guess average attorney fees. And then the second part of that is who is responsible for the attorney fees?
Yeah, definitely. So you're responsible for your own individual attorney fee. So if you're represented, if you're a buyer, a seller, you're represented for your own closing fee. However, if you're purchasing new construction, a lot of times the seller puts the attorney fee onto the buyer. So that's something to be aware of. In terms of closing fees, when you're working with Muhammad here, Muhammad is going to have, fees that are associated with taking out a loan. So those are closing fees. Also, you have a title bill. And so the title bill is based on the purchase price, and it's also based on the loan amount. So those are part of your closing costs. At the closing, there is a title closer. The title closer gets a gratuity. And so that's part of your fee. In terms of the title closer's gratuity, typically it's between like 150 to 250 bucks. The attorney fees. Now, most attorneys charge a flat rate fee. Attorneys charge typically between like say 1,500 and 2,500. I'd say on the higher side. Most attorneys charge around the same amount. So when you are looking for an attorney, you want to look for actually a real estate attorney, and not be so concerned with if this attorney charges maybe 1,500 and then this one charges 1,600. I wouldn't take that as let's go with the attorney that's charging 1,500. I would take it as who can you actually have a conversation with when you call. And also, factors such as, do they have a team? So when they're in a closing, can you still get an answer to your question? Do you have to wait till they get out of the closing? So those are your closing costs, your mortgage fees, your title fees, your attorney fee, and the title closer gets your gratuity. So those are the fees associated with purchasing a home. And sorry, I can't really give you a dollar amount because it depends on how much your loan is and where you're buying, what you're buying, to calculate the title fees, and of course Mohammed's fees, the mortgage fees.
No, that was awesome. Thank you. I appreciate that. Somebody has a question. Their property is in pre-foreclosure, and they're wondering if there's any grants, I guess, that would help them kind of save the property, if you will, or kind of fill that gap. Are you guys familiar with any such programs?
Pre-foreclosure. So,
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question? I don't think I understood it completely.
So somebody on the call is in pre-foreclosure, and I guess they're asking about funding sources to kind of help them take care of that expense, or kind of address like the issue.
So somebody has lates on the mortgage and they're trying to save the property from, no.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, yeah, as far as I know, there aren't any like grant assistance programs that help you with foreclosure. But back to the housing counseling agency, they do have foreclosure counselors, and and if they don't, post the recession, foreclosure resources have increased significantly. So please, whoever wrote that, I'm sorry, I lost the question in a shuffle. Can you send me a private message and I can kind of refer you to a foreclosure counselor, because we definitely don't want you to lose your property. Yeah. Mohammed, maybe. What are some suggestions for home buying if your debt to income ratio isn't great?
Okay, so if your debt to income ratio isn't great, I'm assuming it's because there's a lot of debts. So the best way, honestly, is just to get rid of your debts, try to pay them off. And then that'll improve your debt to income ratio. Other than that, the only other option is to get more income, which is not the easiest thing to do, but with the proper plan and time, it is doable. Another option, if there's another family member that's going to be living in the house that's working, use their income too.
Sorry, just sending a quick message. Would you owning a timeshare, or does owning a timeshare, Mohammed, affect your qualification for the mortgage?
As far as the debt to income ratio, it does, because it's a debt. But other than that, you can still buy a house to live in if a timeshare won't be considered owner occupied. So only as far as it being a debt.
Cool. Somebody asked, is it true you need 2 years worth of credit stability, income, and paperwork?
No. Well, all right. So you need 2 years of employment history, but if you just graduated and the job you're in is related to your major, let's say, you're a lawyer, you went through law school, that can replace the 2-year work history, and that's fine. But, let's say, you're 50 years old pumping gas or something like that, but for some reason you only have 1 year work history, you're going to have a problem.
That's helpful. Justin.
The military can substitute for the 2 years as well, I should add.
Oh, that's good to know as well. That's good to know. Justin, what is the best way to go about finding a home that has disability access? Are there agents who specialize in this area?
Oh, that's a good question. So we might have certifications around that, but really it's going to be based off communicating the need, right? And then see the agent going and vetting properties a little more thoroughly than they normally would, just to make sure that the appropriate accommodations are there. Now, sometimes, like when we bought our house, our owner, she was elderly and she had trouble walking up the stairs. So we had like a chairlift already installed, just an example. But if you need something like that and the house doesn't have it, are there any grant programs from any agencies that you can apply to that can help cover that cost or pay for it entirely if it's that type of accommodation that's needed? As a, just something specific where in general everything else is fine, but you might need like 1 or 2 things just so it's accessible for you. You definitely want to see if that research can be done in the beginning to make the transition as seamless as possible.
Absolutely. Thank you. So Mohammed, we kind of have a follow-up for the co-borrower situation. My husband has poor credit. I have good credit. Will he bring my chances down? That's question number 1. And the second question is, can I get a mortgage just in my name, but still use their joint tax return, I'm assuming, and his income?
Okay. So if somebody's on the file that has under a 620 score, definitely get their score up. If their score, so I guess it kind of depends on what you call, poor credit and not. So technically a 620 is good. Anything above that is good. And the second part was, can they use the income if they don't include him in the loan?
Correct. Like, would they still be able to use their tax information and income?
You can use a tax return, but then his income is going to be omitted from it.
Awesome. Okay. That was interesting. Okay. It's so weird. I'm like in and around real estate, but honestly, every month that I host one of these, I learn something new. So
cool.
Mohammed, if you have a debt in collection, is it better to pay it off or settle? How does this affect you getting qualified for a mortgage?
Okay, I'm gonna say something, but I'm not the one saying it. If you got something in collection, no. If somebody has something in collection, call up the company that is in collection with, see if they'll settle. All right, I'm trying to figure out how to say this without getting in trouble.
Listen, just all right. So disclaimer, these are the professional views of the professionals making them. You as a home buyer should take every precaution to make the best decision for you. And also be mindful, he has over 20 years of experience.
And I wrote the book on the subject, but all right.
And
right.
He wrote the book on the subject.
So hypothetically, let's say somebody's in collection, but they're just not 100% sure it's actually their account. They can call up the company, ask them if they're willing to settle, but on the terms that they'll actually delete the account. And then if that happens, the account never existed, neither did the lates. Now, I'm not saying to do that, but somebody could do that.
So if you just so happen to do that and it works, and your credit score bumps up after, your DTI improves after, make sure you send Mohammed thank yous. Mohammed, can you tell us what's included in the mortgage payment, the P, the I, the T, the I?
Okay. So the P&I is principal and interest. That's what the mortgage payment actually is. The taxes are the property taxes. And the last I is for the homeowner's insurance. And I don't know why they never included this, but if you have PMI or MIP, that's also part of the mortgage payment itself as well. And then also, let's say it's a condo, co-op, whatever it is, then, you have your maintenance fees.
Okay, Mohammed, how soon after making a big purchase, like leasing a car, should you apply for pre-approval?
To be honest with you, as long as your score is a 620, that's really the big thing. If it's under 620, get it up higher. Other than that, it doesn't really factor into anything, except for the debt to income ratio, which whether you wait a month or until the end of the lease, it's still going to be calculated into the debt.
Awesome. Can you speak to how defaulted school loans affect your ability to qualify for a mortgage?
Okay. So when it comes to FHA, you cannot be delinquent on federal debt, which includes Sallie Mae. So if you have student loans that aren't brought up to par, basically you need to go into a payment plan and show proof of payments for 3 months.
Thanks, Mohammed. Somebody asked what is the credit score they should have before applying for a mortgage. I think Mohammed kind of said it a couple times, 620 sounds like the baseline. But I would keep in mind that if you have, I think it's like 750 or 760, somewhere around there, you're getting like the best of the best rates. So, continue. No, continue.
All right, so when you look online and you see those teaser rates, and I actually got a video on this if, it's on YouTube. So with the teaser rates, those are actually, 740 credit scores, 30% down, and 20 years, ain't nobody putting down 30%. It doesn't happen, very rarely. So you can start with the 620 and get pre-approved, but remember, you're not locking in the rate until basically the very end of the process, which is, you still got to do the inspection, look for the house, go in a contract, go through all of that, which it could be theoretically 2.5 to 2 months later. During that time, you can boost your score up. You have your credit report in your hand, so you'll know what to do to raise that score. So you have roughly about 60 days to get your score up. And then, yes, absolutely, you want your score, at a 740 if possible.
Gotcha. And can I add one thing to that?
Please.
Yeah, when it comes to the mortgage requirement for like the 620 credit, if you're going to buy a co-op, just remember the co-op has a separate standard than the bank. So the co-op might require 650 or 700. So even if you qualify for the mortgage, you might not qualify for that co-op. So that's the whole thing you got to juggle.
I have another grant question. Mohammed and or Justin, are you guys familiar with New York City First Home Buyers Program? I guess he's talking about the HPD program.
Oh, the first, yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, if anyone wants, I have a guide of down payment programs in New York and Connecticut. I have it on my website, so anyone can download that from the website.
Awesome. At this time, can I ask the panelists to kind of put their contact information in the chat? If you have any educational links that you would like to share, that you would like people to use, you can also drop that in the chat, or you can send it to me, and I can kind of send it out to the attendees tomorrow.
Okay.
Do that right now?
Yep, you can do that now. As we kind of wind down, I do want to be respectful of people's time. We do have a couple more questions though, so I do want to just address everybody's questions before we head out this evening. So one question we have: does this program depend on a type of home someone is looking to purchase? For example, a house or a condo? I'm not really sure, Ms. Johnson, what your question is asking. Can you rephrase? And then we'll try to answer you live. How to get an accurate credit score. Free annualcreditreport.com. You can get an accurate credit score. Typically, they only give you your scores once a year. But with COVID, it's to my understanding that they are providing scores a little bit more often. Credit Karma does utilize a different scoring model than what the banks use and what the auto lenders use. So I would use Credit Karma as a guide, and I personally use Credit Karma as a guide. Like if I'm paying down, my credit cards, I'll see some jumps, on my Credit Karma account. But I do know, just kind of with my knowledge, that the different scoring models does affect what your score ultimately will be when it's pulled by the bank. So I would just kind of keep that in mind. Mohammed, somebody is requesting that you repeat the steps to get your collections removed from your credit report.
All right. So basically, if you think there's something wrong with the account, something isn't, jiving up right, you call up the creditor, ask them if they're willing to settle the account, and tell them it's on condition that they delete the account and send you a copy of the deletion letter if you feel there's something not right with the account.
Crystal, or maybe even Justin, what does it mean when somebody says closing in 30 days, all cash?
Oh, they're not using a mortgage. They're going to buy the house all cash and they can close in 30 days or less. Or they can close in 30 days.
Right. And that term all cash just means that they're, like he said, they're not using a mortgage. So cash is not like physical, you show up to the closing with a, briefcase or like a duffel bag, none of that, nothing like you see in the movies. It's you're getting a certified check. And that just means that, just like Justin stated, no mortgage. So that's what all cash means. In 30 days is what it is. In New York State, we say on or about, or we say on or before a certain time frame. So if we say on or about, that means that there's another 30 days after the stated date. So if I say you're going to close on or about March 1st, then that's to say that, like, let's try to close as soon as possible. You can close prior to March 1st, that's fine, but you have up to 30 days after March 1st. So in that on or about March 1st scenario, you have until March 31st to close.
So somebody asked, does the bank only look at the score or the credit summary and history as well? And I guess I would kind of say that your credit history really influences your score. So if you have a history of delinquent payments or non-payment, over, your credit usage is over 30%, you're carrying a balance every month, those type of things are gonna affect your credit score. So while they might not specifically kind of delve into your credit history, it does affect the score that they're going to use ultimately and if they will pre-approve you. So I would just keep that in mind. Justin, can you let us know who pays the real estate agent fees?
Agent fees. So if, let's say, a property is on the MLS, the multiple listing service, which is the database that us real estate professionals use, there's an agreement of compensation. So if I put a house up for sale on the MLS, I will say that I'm going to pay a part of my commission to the buyer's agent who procures the buyer for the property, right? So a lot of times agents they'll be paid through through the seller's agents, splitting their commission with them. That was a technical way to say, I kind of can't say what you're asking technically, because Virginia and I are both licensed and they call that price fixing. But you can reach out to us individually and we can tell you what we might charge. I just took my broker's exam, so I'm all up on this stuff right now. But yeah, if they're getting an agreement of compensation, I mean, just talk to the agent or talk to the broker and see if they're seeking any charge from you as a buyer.
Yes, I think Justin answered that perfectly. So I would kind of just second what he just said. At this time, we don't have any more questions. I'm kind of checking the chat and I don't see any more questions. We're right at a little bit over the 7:30 mark. So if you do have questions, please kind of throw them in the chat, throw them in the Q&A box while we're still live. If not, I am going to release you guys to enjoy the rest of your evenings. We have a question. Where can I find the panelists' contact information? So the panelists have dropped their information in the chat, but what I will do as well, I will send out, for all the registered attendees, I'll send out their information, as well as the NACA links, as well as the HUD housing counselor links. So any links that were dropped in the chat tonight, I'll send that out via email. I'll also include this recorded video, so you could kind of use this as a reference as well. One more question.
Make it a tough one.
Thank you. We're gonna find. Oh, so it was the same question. Thanks for the panelists. Thank you so much. Like I said, I host these almost like monthly. I am a real estate agent. I'm attempting, I guess, to start a housing counseling agency. And so I feel like, obviously connecting with individuals that have such a wealth of knowledge as you guys do, I'm always appreciative to be in your company. So thank you for giving me your time.
Thank you for organizing this.
Not a problem, not a problem.
Virginia, good job. Yeah, and thanks for having us, for sure.
Yeah.
Had a good time.
Thank you. So with that, I would say good night. And hopefully I see you in March. That'll be our next one.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you.